You know what? Let me remind you what Trump did. So let me actually show you video 2 one last time here, and then I'll tell you the Republican reaction to it. So Donald Trump on Saturday did not condemn the white nationalists, supremacists, KKK, or the Nazis. He said this:
"We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides. It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. It's been going on for a long, long time."
So clearly not calling out people by their names, the groups by their names, and creating one of the worst false equivalencies I have ever seen in my life, where he seems to be blaming the peaceful protesters who were run over and killed in the same batch as the neo-Nazis who did it. Republican legislators and other conservatives had mixed reactions to that. So first, let me give you the guys who seem to back Trump. Senator Luther Strange, Republican of Alabama, said, "I stand with President Trump and leaders from both parties condemning these actions and encourage Americans to stand together in opposition to those who encourage hate or promote violence." So taken by itself, it's a perfectly fine statement. Taken in the context of, hey, are you with Trump when he won't call out the white supremacists? Not a fine statement. Obviously trying to say both sides do it. No, both sides did not do it. It was the white nationalists who did it. So then you go to Pence, and Pence is going to be filled with talking out of both sides of his mouth because he's a classic sleazy politician. Luckily here, the reporter is not going to let him get away with it. Let's watch.
President Trump yesterday stated clearly that he condemns hate and violence in all of its forms. We will not tolerate hatred and violence of groups like white supremacists, the KKK, and the neo-Nazis. These extremist fringe groups have no place in the American debate.
But you say
we condemn them in the strongest possible terms.
You say that. Why won't the president use those same words, and why hasn't he?
I think the American people heard the president yesterday speak plainly and condemn, in his words, in the strongest possible terms, organizations that purvey hate and violence.
So Pence did name him there, give him credit for that. And he does have to somehow defend Donald Trump, who is indefensible. But when he says he condemned them in the strongest possible terms, that's the opposite of what he did. He didn't condemn them, he didn't name them. Instead, he was equivocal about it. The Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi website, afterwards said, "See, Trump loves us all. He did not condemn us. He's on our side." They received that message. Pence, as usual, wanting it both ways. No, I did the right thing, but I completely support President Trump, who did a horrific thing. I mean, he kind of condemned them more.
He said on many sides. Name those sides. What are the sides?
Well, look, as I said today, we condemn in the strongest terms the hate and violence advocated by groups like white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and their ilk.
But that's one side. What's the other side when he says on many sides?
Well, as you look throughout the course of recent years, we've seen protests turn violent. We've seen fringe groups use peaceful protest environment to bring violence, in some cases, against police officers.
So is he comparing Black Lives Matter there to these domestic terrorists? You know, the biggest charge they have against Black Lives Matter is that once they chanted the wrong thing. I thought you guys were for freedom of speech. And it was, by the way, if you've never seen the history of that whole fry 'em like bacon chant was done with a cop that was there, and they were kidding around. But no, they turned that into, oh, I can't believe they chanted the wrong thing. How dare they speak in America? And now you're doing a false equivalency, and now you're doing it actively, Mike Pence, and comparing them to people who murdered people in the streets. One last one from Pence.
I will tell you, Peter, that I take issue with the fact that many in the media are spending more time criticizing how the president addressed the issue.
But this is Orrin G and Cory Gardner, sir. It's not me. I'm reading their quotes.
Many in the media have spent an awful lot of time focusing on what the president said and criticisms of what the president said, instead of criticizing those who brought that hatred and violence to the streets.
Yes, you know why? Because there's always been the KKK in America. There's always been neo-Nazis. So, and from time to time, they've taken violent action. But is supposed to be the president that stands up for all of us. It's supposed to be the government that condemns it, brings law and order, rule of law, and actually makes sure that you protect our citizens. So having terrorism in America, unfortunately, is something that has happened before. Having a president not condemning the terrorism because he thinks it's their voters is unique and horrific. If you had any sense at all, you'd be able to understand that, but he's a pathetic yes man for Donald Trump. So there he is, coddling Trump and condoning his actions. So now, let's be fair though, there were a lot of Republicans who were much clearer than the president was, including his attorney general. And Jeff Sessions has been criticized in the past for issues relating to race, but here I think he did exactly the right thing. I want to show you a clip from him.
Was this domestic terror?
Well, it doesn't meet the definition of domestic terrorism in our statute. We are pursuing it in the Department of Justice in every way that we can make a case. You can be sure we will charge and advance the investigation toward the most serious charges that can be brought, because this is an unequivocally unacceptable and evil attack that cannot be accepted in America.
So that's great. That's the right way to do it. And he's not alone. There was a lot of Republicans who came out and were strong on this issue. Senator Lindsey Graham said, I would urge the president to dissuade these groups that he's their friend, because certainly they do think that right now. Senator Orrin Hatch said, we should call evil by its name. My brother didn't give his life fighting Hitler for Nazi ideas to go unchallenged here at home. So a lot I disagree with all of these guys on, but bless their hearts on being clear here. Anthony Scaramucci went on TV, of course, White House communications director for Donald Trump, for about 3 seconds. He said it was much harsher as it relates to white supremacists, and that it was incumbent on him to do so because of the moral authority of the presidency, that he should have been much harsher when he came to white supremacists. H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, said that it was a form of terrorism, so that is also clear. Senator Cory Gardner said, Mr. President, we must call evil by its name. These were white supremacists, and this was domestic terrorism. Marco Rubio said, very important for the nation to hear the president describe events in Charlottesville for what they are, a terror attack by white supremacists. He's indicating, of course, the president did not do that, because he didn't. And finally, on Monday, the president changed his tune 2 days later and said, fine, including the KKK and neo-Nazis. Senator Ted Cruz over the weekend came out and said it's tragic and heartbreaking to see hatred and racism once again mar our great nation with bloodshed. He said the Nazis, the KKK, and white supremacists are repulsive and evil, and all of us have moral obligation to speak out against the lies, bigotry, anti-Semitism, and hatred that they propagate. So it's good to hear him say that. One more from Cruz. He said, having watched the horrifying video of the car deliberately crashing into a crowd of protesters, I urge the Department of Justice to immediately investigate and prosecute this grotesque act of domestic terrorism. And finally, one more Republican for you, Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. He said, what white nationalists are doing in Charlottesville is homegrown terrorism that can't be tolerated anymore. A great way to explain it. And see, number one, Donald Trump, it wasn't that hard. All these, your fellow Republicans are doing it, and they're doing it very forcefully and clearly. So for all of you saying that, oh no, Trump couldn't have said it this way, apparently he could have, because they all did. Secondarily, I just want to give you the full context and give credit to the Republicans who did do the right thing. And thirdly, I don't want you to lose hope, because I think that there is going to come a point when the people in power go, no, we're not going to have Nazis in America. We're not going to have them. I mean, we always do, but we're not going to have them committing acts of violence in America and getting away with it. We're not going to have a president that encourages that and doesn't condemn it clearly. So, you always think Trump crossed the line and then he seems to get beyond it. But I think he's crossed one too many lines. And the fact that he couldn't clear this, the lowest of the bars, which is condemning Nazi violence in America, I think is going to change a lot of minds, not on the Democratic side or even among independents, but I think among Republican supporters, donors, most importantly, because they control the party, and others in power that go, this isn't what we signed up for. I know we wanted large tax cuts, but this is not a price worth paying for that. Besides which, other establishment Republicans and a lot of establishment Democrats would give you those giant tax cuts anyway. You don't need the neo-Nazi package to come along with it. Finally, I want to end on a Democrat because this is very powerful. So John Dingell, who was the longest serving congressman in United States history, now finally retired, is now 91 years old. And he said, what happened yesterday was radical terrorism. And he identified the president as in the tweet to make sure the president sees it. And he said, the refusal to identify, denounce it, and fight it makes one complicit in it. And he ended by saying, I signed up to fight Nazis 73 years ago, and I'll do it again if I have to. Hatred, bigotry, and fascism should have no place in this country. Really powerful to hear a World War II veteran saying, if I got to, I will stand a post, and we will not let those Nazis win here. Watch the Young Turks commercial free, download it or stream it, watch it any way you like at tytnetwork.com/join.